family, social issues, education, religion, government, or national security. Brannon brings the issues of the day into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon Howse.
And good evening. Welcome to the broadcast. Glad you are with us tonight, folks. We have a big program, and we are anticipating an historic evening. President Donald Trump delivering an address to the nation. And we are told now by the White House press secretary, I think today was her first day back after having a child. And she said, yes, indeed, it will be dealing with the 2020 election. We may have some news about Iran. We have Annie Cyrus, our expert from Iran, on Iran, standing by. But tonight, joining me is going to be none other than Mike Lindell and also attorney Dan Eastman, also someone who has worked for a long time on this issue of elections, and Garland Favorito, Georgia vote of Georgia. What is it? Voter GA. There it is. GAvoter.org. See, I don't work with a teleprompter over at House Live like most people. What is it? VoterGA.org. Yeah, there you go. So he'll be joining us. Now, of course, yesterday, Mike Lindell had two endorsements from President Donald Trump. He is leading in the polls there, it looks like, with Republican voters to be the next governor. And so the primary is coming up August 11th. I was talking to a Minnesotan this afternoon, someone who, well, my former youth pastor for, gazillion years ago. And he said, I'm hoping that what the president says tonight will really help to vindicate Mike Lindell. The timing would be perfect as he's running for governor. It would open the eyes of a lot of Minnesotans who are discounting. Well, let me tell you, it would open the eyes of a lot of people who are outside of Minnesota as well, who, many of them maybe didn't believe it or didn't take it as seriously as they should. So this could be, and I'm hoping it will be, a historic speech tonight on a massive problem. We were told first there was about 100,000 people on the rolls. It should not be there, like illegals. Now the last figure we have is, according to sources, 200,000. Well, I think Dr. Doug Frank, who I think will join us after the speech, but I'm pretty sure that Mike Lindell, Garland Favorito, Dan Eastman all know that number, 250,000, is way low. Well, let's get ready for tonight's speech as soon as the president comes to the Oval Office or the East Wing. I don't know where he's speaking from tonight, but as soon as we get the word, we will go right away to the president. In the meantime, tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, Truth Social. Let everybody know we have Mike Lindell, Garland Favorito, and Dan Eastman. We'll have the coverage. I guess a couple of the major outlets are not covering it tonight. A major address by the president, and they don't want to cover it. That's a little disturbing. Aren't they supposed to be covering things that are of the public interest with their license? Joining me now are those three gentlemen, Garland Favorito, Dan Eastman, and Mike Lindell. Gentlemen, welcome, as we're about 20 minutes or so from 22 minutes from the president appearing. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you, Mike and Dan and Garland. Mike, let's go to you first. My friend from Minnesota, a long time, decades and decades, Minnesotan friend of mine, my old youth pastor, he said today, I hope tonight's speech vindicates Mike Lindell, because it maybe would wake a lot of Minnesotans up that, the media has wanted to push him around about, election denier and conspiracy theories. What are you hearing? Are you getting any leaks about what might be said in tonight's speech?
No, I don't. I can hope what's in there. I hope there's a couple of things I hope for or pray for. I hope the president stays focused on the election, period. Just stay hammer at the 2020 election, hammer the we've got to get to paper ballots, hand counted. Just focus on the fraud. We've all seen it. What I hope is that we've all seen it. We all know it's real, 100%, not 99.9. We need to show the people in this country and around the world that this is real. That's why 100 and some other countries have banned electronic voting machines. That's why our elections have to be deemed critical infrastructure. We can't go into this midterms with the condition we're in now. They need to show, I hope he shows enough here For me, I hope it goes back to Venezuela with Smartmatic, of course, because that's one of the ones I still have sitting out there, where Dominion completely dropped their lawsuit because probably afraid of the 800 pages we have on Lindell TV now of here irrefutable evidence. So that's why I just hope it stays focused, how important this is, and it's the most important thing. And then it wakes people up, not just in Minnesota, but across the country. That just wakes them up if they go, hey, what, if they're all going to ask themselves, if this is real, what would you say then if you knew 100% it was real? And we've got to get them to that place, because everybody would be just saying, I would never have went all in and put $80 million, everything I had in this world, into this over the last 5 years if I wasn't 100%. If I'd have been 99.9, I hit one in a billions all the time. I'd have said, well, I better tiptoe in or just go in to a certain extent, but it's just like when Tina Peters came out of prison, she didn't just stop there. She hit the ground running. Hey, we got to get rid of the machines. We've got to secure our elections. And that's what I hope we can get to people and say, at least the media, if you stop the media's brainwashing and the media suppressing all of us for 5 years now, Garland, you've been going on longer than that, but I mean, for 5 years where they just suppress the truth. And that's why I'm going to be very surprised if Fox News airs this tonight, or even any part of it.
ABC, correct me if I'm wrong, fact check me in the control room. ABC and what other CBS, who's not airing it tonight? Look it up for me. I thought I heard ABC, and we'll see who else.
You think Fox News is airing it?
No, I don't think so. I think I've heard ABC, NBC, and ABC are not airing it. All right. And I'll be shocked to see if Fox is airing it, but we'll watch.
I'll be shocked to see if Chris Ruddy airs it at Newsmax. That will really shock me. I had to call him up and say, Chris, the president endorsed me for governor of Minnesota. You think I could come on after 5 years on Newsmax? I won't say anything that rhymes with Dominion. I mean, come on.
What was the answer?
He goes, oh, yeah, no, Mike, we'll have you on. Yeah, we'll have you on. Well, we'll see. I'm sorry, but it's disgusting. It's just, I got the president endorsement for running for governor in one of our biggest problem states, and you can't have me on, but you can have other candidates from Minnesota on. I think people who are watching Newsmax would like to know that at least I'm running.
Yeah, exactly. Garland, we heard 100,000 illegals on the rolls. Then we heard from a source claiming that the president will mention 250,000 on the rolls. Garland, I think you and I know there's got to be not 250,000, but millions on the rolls, right, Garland?
That's just in Georgia, Brannon. I think we can deduce tonight what he might be talking about. One is, let's go back to his executive order 14248. And you remember he ordered the Tulsi Gabbard and an investigation of the voting machines. He also ordered an investigation of the voter rolls. I think we're going to hear some of the results from these tonight. And if you go back to 2016, you remember that incredible work that Tulsi did. It actually showed basically a cover-up by election officials. So my gut feeling is that he'll touch on all those topics tonight and some more. So I'm really anxious. I think it's going to be an actual historic evening, probably, maybe arguably the most important speech ever made by a president. So I'm really excited about it. We're going to be doing our own online, and we're going to be actually live streaming my segment on your show here after the podcast. I'm looking forward to being back here with you in a little bit.
Absolutely. So all these guys will be back with us after the president's speech. We'll all be taking notes. Dan Eastman, he's an attorney. You have been covering election cases for the 5-6 years, working with guys like Mike Lindell. with Mike Lindell. We have the mutual friend, Kurt Olson, the attorney, former Navy SEAL, who works so closely with Mike Lindell on so many cases, been in this studio many, many, many times. And I believe he went to work right underneath the president and at the president's pleasure in his second term related to this issue. What are you hearing or what are you expecting tonight? And by the way, everybody be praying for Dan. Dan has walking pneumonia. And on top of that, he has to deal with very, very, I'm not being sarcastic, folks, super thick smoke coming from Canada into Milwaukee. You could barely see the skyline in Milwaukee today. So that's not good for people with health issues. But Dan's got walking pneumonia. We're glad you're here. You're a trooper. What are you expecting to hear tonight, Dan?
Well, you never front run the president of the United States, of course, but this is an interesting time. We have been dealing with this issue in the United States since the hanging Chad era. And if you go back to 2016, where Jill Stein lost to President Trump along with Hillary Clinton, a lot of these issues were raised. And I entered this space back in 2020, working with Sidney Powell, who filed one of her 4 Kraken cases in the state of Wisconsin. And it was my job to dig into the exhibits and make sure that these exhibits were correct. And it was a very interesting process, because what I learned in my research was that in 2016, 4 years before the 2020 election, Jill Stein and Hillary Clinton were making the very same allegations that the Russians and the Iranians are hacking into the system and the machines were switching the votes and the election was thrown and Donald Trump somehow beat Hillary Clinton because of machine shenanigans. This is not new. And of course, when they filed their lawsuit in 2016, they were given an evidentiary hearing. And they had experts like J. Alex Halderman, the famous computer scientist from the University of Michigan. They had Professor Rivest from MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Professor Stark from Stanford University, Berkeley University in California. And these experts all testified to the same thing, that the machines were vulnerable, they could be hacked, and therefore electronic machines could not be trusted. They asked for a hand recount of all of the Wisconsin ballots, 3.2 million ballots. Well, the court ruled that they would get a machine recount, but the judge in that case, Valerie Bailey Wynn, who's retiring this year, excellent jurist from Dane County, she says, and I quote, "I think the hand count is typically viewed as the gold standard for accuracy if it's done well." So back in 2016, this was an issue. Now you fast forward to 2020, of course, President Trump loses, lawsuits are filed. And when we filed in Wisconsin, we had J. Alex Halderman as an expert witness, same guy that Hillary had 4 years ago. Same thing with Harry Herstein, other prominent experts, all of whom concluded, looking at the machines, looking at the statistics and the technology, that these electronically run elections are suspect. And it's high time that President Trump take the podium and explain to the people of America, what can the federal government do to make sure that our American elections are fair and honest? Now, we have the constitutional problem, of course, that the states under our American Constitution are basically in charge of their own elections. And we send an electoral college to Washington to elect a president. We send 2 senators and we send a number of representatives, and that's all we do with the federal government. The rest of it's all state and local elections. So it's a really difficult problem when you have states, and we've seen so many times across the country in the last 6 years where the state officials who are charged with administering our elections, the keepers of our democracy, they don't care. They simply don't care. All they want to do is whiz through an election, announce a winner, and get on with their lives. And our democracy, our way of governance, is in the balance. And that's what all of this has been about since 2020. There's been some great national heroes. Mike Lindell has spent virtually his entire fortune fighting this one battle. Sidney Powell, John Eastman, others who have been in the battle for a very long time, and yet not one thing has been fixed in 6 years. And that's why I think what the president talks about tonight is very, very important.
Well, let's go to
fix this mess.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to see how he says we're going to fix it. Let's go to one of the videos. The Democrats because this is not a partisan issue. This is one of Mike Lindell's favorite clips. If I had $1 for every time Mike and I played this over the last 5 years, this is one of Mike Lindell's favorite clips. But this is not a partisan issue. The Democrats were saying the same thing in 2016. I believe that was the year, right, Mike?
Yeah, well, and remember in 2018 and 2019, Amy Klobuchar, who I'm going to be running against here, he was the #1 voice in the country, the loudest voice, louder than Mike Lindell, yelling, "We've got to get rid of the voting machines." And she named them ES&S, Hart, Dominion, and she didn't get sued for $2 billion. It was amazing. But Amy was the loudest voice. But yeah, I don't know what year we've got. I think it's collaboration of all the years with the Democrats. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, here it is. Here's Mike Lindell's favorite clip of one of about 3. Here we go.
I continue to think that our voting machines are too vulnerable.
Researchers have repeatedly demonstrated that ballot recording machines and other voting systems are susceptible to tampering.
Even hackers with limited prior knowledge, tools, and resources are able to breach voting machines in a matter of minutes.
In 2018, electronic voting machines in Georgia and Texas deleted votes for certain candidates or switched votes from one candidate to another.
The biggest seller of voting machines is doing something that violates Cybersecurity 101, directing that you install remote access software, which would make a machine like that, a magnet for fraudsters and hackers.
These voting machines can be hacked quite easily.
You could easily hack into them. It makes it seem like all these states are doing different things, but in fact, 3 companies are controlling them.
There are a lot of states that are dealing with antiquated machines, right, which are vulnerable to being hacked.
Workers were able to easily hack into an electronic voting machine. It was possible to switch votes.
43% of American voters use voting machines that researchers have found have serious security flaws, including backdoors.
We know how vulnerable now our systems were. I know the hackathon that took place last year, where virtually every machine was broken into fairly quickly.
I actually held a demonstration for my colleagues here at the Capitol, where we brought in folks who, before our eyes, hacked election machines, those that are being used in many states.
In a close presidential election, they just need to hack one swing state, or maybe 1 or 2, or maybe just a few counties in one swing state.
Well, there you go. And
hey, Brannon,
yeah.
I'd like to comment there. There was one false statement there, at least, and that's 43%. No, in the United States, it's like 99.9% of every single election is counted by machines. It's that people say, "Oh no, our state has paper ballots." Well, good for you, Special K. They're not hand counted. Paper ballots hand counted. Okay.
So they'll take the paper ballots and run them through machines.
Run them through the machines, run them through the tabulators, the computers. I mean, and well, you got a paper backup. No, you don't. Especially like in Minnesota, you touch the screen and then it goes into the machine. Your vote and it comes out paper. Well, the machine can decide whatever the heck you want for that count.
Look at this letter.
A long-term problem. I have a letter from 2010. That's 16 years ago. It's a letter from the Voter Action Group, and they were alleging in 2010 that the Chinese were interfering with the elections. This is 16 years ago, allegations of the Chinese hacking. And if you watch Mike's videos from 2020, it's the same allegations. We've been making the same allegations as a nation for a very long time. And we hope that President Trump addresses this with the force of the White House to be able to bring these people to justice and to secure our voting systems. There's no possible way that you can have an honest democratic election with digital technology. You cannot do it because digital technology can be hacked. And the only way to have fair elections in America is paper ballots, hand marked, hand counted, and that's the only way you're going to have an honest election that isn't subject to speculation. Even if these digital elections are completely fair, and many counties and wards are. You open the door to speculation and conspiracy, and that is not healthy for democracy. We need to guard our democracy with everything we have. It's more important than our fishing licenses and our driver's licenses, all the other administrative stuff that's online. This is our democracy and our constitutional right to select the people who represent us. And if we don't protect that at a much higher standard than we do today, then we've yielded this, and American elections become an illusion. And that's where we are today. In many instances, these things are illusions. They're not fact-driven results.
Let me show you this. Mike Lindell and I, of course, talked a lot about this. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with it as well. This is black box voting. Bev Harris. Now, this lady is basically, from last I heard, retired. She's like, okay, I did my part. I'm out. But I'll tell you, a gentleman that was a friend of Mike Lindell and myself and Mike's network, when Mike and I were working together with Lindell TV, produced the show of none other than the former CNN host, Lou Dobbs, who, while on CNN, was interviewing people like Bev Harris. This book came out in 2004. Now, you can go over to her website, blackboxvoting.org, and she talks about how this book was ordered by the White House in 2004. It was reported to have been found on Osama bin Laden's bookshelf when he was killed. It's been downloaded 500,000 times. What is she talking? And even Vanity Fair's got an endorsement on here. What was she saying? She was talking about how vulnerable these machines are. What do you do when you find 40,000 secret voting machine files on the web? What if you knew that the devil went down to Georgia on November 5th, 2002, and in a stunning upset, tipped control of the U.S. Senate, and then you saw a folder called Rob Georgia, looked inside and found instructions to replace Georgia's computerized voting files right before the election? Author Bev Harris's 52-year-old grandma who found those files, which have now been studied by computer scientists all over the world. Black box voting is an all too true story resulting from her investigation into the voting industry. Remember, we have an endorsement here by Vanity Fair. You guys are familiar with this, aren't you? Black box voting. I know you are, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This goes back further. We all know Clint Curtis now, that this former Democrat, that he set up the first hacking thing in the early 2000s down in Georgia. And he showed how to not hack, but he hacked in with his system. And if you remember in the Lou Dobbs back then, it all got brought up publicly worldwide. And I remember Clint telling me the story. The Netherlands called him up and said, hey, what do we do? How do we make these machines secure? And he said, you can't. He said, well, what do we do? He said, throw them in the ocean. And the Netherlands basically switched over to paper ballots in 5 months, which was beat by Argentina that did it in 4 months. And when they said, oh, Your Honor, it can't be done. It can't be done. That was in the summer of 2022. So this has been going on for so long. And I want people out there to know that are watching tonight, we're 5 years ahead of this. So what you're hearing from the president tonight, we're 5 years out in front of this. But you know what? We know all the evidence is there. He could sit and show our evidence and show things that are impossibilities, mathematical, not improbabilities, impossibilities. Like the gal in Georgia, they got 0 votes in her own precinct. I love talking about that, Brannon. And old crooked Brad Rassenberger says, well, we had a programming here. What are you doing programming our elections, But anyway, we have systems in place immediately that can be put in paper ballots, hand counted. At least 3 of them our teams have, after meeting with Taiwan and Argentina and France, the Netherlands, taking best practices and putting them together. Clint Curtis out in California has an amazing counting system out there under camera, and they used it in the 2024 election. This was in California, everybody. So anyone that says, oh, this is important, this is huge, this is so critical, we can do it today. We can do it. It can be done before the midterms, the stuff that we need done to get rid of these machines. And and another thing I wanted to bring up, the thing that I look back over these 5 years. I was in a Senate hearing in Louisiana with then their Secretary of State, Kyle Ardoin, who turned out to be something that he didn't appear to be. I could probably say something, probably get sued again. But anyway, I'm down there at a Senate hearing, and they had all the machine companies down there, and they're all selling their pitches and what why their machines could be better than others, or a hand counting system, and so they're going through this. Well, I was actually feeding the questions to Kyle Ardwin, who then was asking the machine companies the question, and he asked ES&S. This is the biggest machine company in the United States, everybody, not Dominion. It's ES&S out of Omaha, Nebraska, the good old boys, right? Well, they asked them, and they said, these are their executives there. They said, are your machines more secure than Dominion? Asked them straight out. Here was their answer. No voting machines are secure. They all have back doors, end quote. I was floored. I go, he just said this. I mean, it's like, it's like, would you trust everything? When you have a problem at your bank account and you see a deviation, what do? You go to the bank, everybody, and what's the first thing they do? They look into the computer and see if things match. Where's the, something happened, was something changed? Here's my balance. I got proof. Here's my balance. Here are my deposits. How come you have this number? And they fix it. They don't say, oh, it's proprietary technology. You can't even look. Imagine having an Indy 500 race and all these cars, all of a sudden they have governors on them. You can't go fast. They go, there's something wrong. Well, let's look under the hood. No, you can't look under the hood. That's just secret technology. And that's where we've at. Over these last 5 years, we're in a different place now than we were 5 years ago. Because now the people in the country, by the president showing them tonight how critical this is, and just a glimpse of what we all know, everyone, I would hope anyone that watches tonight will say, you know what, open up those machines now. Show us how they're secure. Show us how, because they can't, because it's impossible.
We're waiting for the president. As soon as he comes to the microphone, we will cut away to it. These guys will be back. Mike, I didn't know what you were going to bring up tonight as far as that hearing down in Louisiana, but I happened to have that video. I went and gathered what I remembered, because we have a file. We have a file of what we knew were Mike's favorite videos from when we were running Lindell TV together, and I knew this was one of them. Here it is. Watch and listen, my friends.
Yeah, listen to this.
Is there no audio on that, guys? You're not getting audio on it. That's weird. Let's try one more time.
Some folks have claimed, academics, election system experts have claimed that ballot marking devices are inherently vulnerable to hacking or malware or tampering. All technology, whether it's your laptop, your phone, an ATM machine, or an X-ray machine, can have vulnerabilities.
There you go. All right. Is the president ready? All right. Let's go to the president. We'll come back with this panel right after the president. Here's President Donald Trump. All right. We're going to bring it up here. I got it. All right. Let me get it, guys. Are we going to have to sit through a commercial before the president speaks? Let's pray not. Let's pray not. Here we go.
Pouring in from all over the world, including criminals of all types, and 11,888 murders, many of whom killed more than one person. We had transgender for everybody, men and women sports, crime ravaging our cities, and the whole world was laughing at us as a nation, but not anymore. 2 years ago, our country was dead. Now, we are the hottest country anywhere in the world. America is respected like we have never been respected before. We have more money being invested in the United States than at any time in the history of our country. More Americans are working today than ever before. This week, it was announced that inflation saw the largest monthly decline in more than 6 years. Just happened. It was just given out. The media reported it, and we accept it. The best in 6 years. The tax cuts in our great, big, beautiful bill are saving hardworking families thousands and thousands of dollars, like with the provisions, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for our great seniors, along with the interest deduction on a loan used to purchase a car, but only if that car is made in America, and a 100% expensing for our job-creating businesses. Our stock markets are at their highest point in many years, but we can actually say of all time. And your 401ks, pensions, and retirement accounts are setting records every single day, the highest in history. For years, we paid the highest price for prescription drugs anywhere in the world. Now we pay the lowest price under my most favored nation's policy because I was able to get the rest of the world and the pharmaceutical companies to act responsibly. Drug prices are coming down by 70, 80, and 90%. TrumpRx.gov, this will ultimately reduce the cost of health care. You have to go to TrumpRx.gov and take advantage of it. But the cost of health care is coming way down because of what we've done with prescription drugs. And with Trump accounts, every child in America now has access to a tax-free investment account to save for their future. Billions and billions of dollars are being invested, put in by companies and individuals to take care of our children so that at age 18, they will have potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in their account, and they'll get off to a great start in life. So for that, go to TrumpAccounts.gov and sign up your child or any child who'd like to sign up. Our previously wide open borders have been transformed into the most secure borders in the history of our country, with 0 illegal aliens being admitted to the United States in the past 14 months. That is 0. Nobody thought it was possible. We had the worst border in the history of our country, and now we have the best. Crime is plummeting nationwide, with the murder rate at its lowest level since 1900, or more than 125 years ago. We're making a record investment in our armed forces, and we have the strongest and most powerful military by far anywhere in the world. I built it during my first term, and unfortunately, we're forced to use it now. We won in Venezuela, which is now working with us to produce millions and millions of barrels of oil. We are likewise winning big in Iran, and you will see the fruits of that labor very, very shortly. America is back and doing really well, but we still have a major challenge that must be urgently addressed, because no country can be great without fair and honest elections. You have to trust your country, because if there can be no trust, there can be no greatness. And that's very simple. No trust, no greatness. For many years, I've called for bold, swift, and decisive action to protect the integrity of America's elections. Every American deserves to know that when they cast their vote, that vote will be counted accurately in a system, and that is to make that system secure. One where cheating and interference are not just difficult, but virtually impossible. Unfortunately, the system we have today falls catastrophically short of that standard. Tonight, I'm announcing the immediate declassification and release of critical intelligence revealing shocking vulnerabilities in our election infrastructure. This evidence shows that the election system we have dangerously exposes, and really exposes like levels never thought possible, to hacking, exploitation, and foreign interference. Just as disturbingly, this vital information has for many years been covered up and hidden from you, the American people, our beautiful, our great American people. But that all changes right now. The documents we will release starting tonight have been gathered by the White House Government Transparency Task Force, a great group of people, along with the staff of the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, supported by our top intelligence agency chiefs, who have all personally reviewed the findings. We are presenting this evening and fully confirmed their authenticity. You can see these documents for yourself at whitehouse.gov. That's whitehouse.gov. Go check it out. Our purpose in disclosing this information is not to weaken confidence in election, but to earn that confidence by confronting vulnerabilities and correcting them very, very quickly. And that's what we're doing. The documents cover 5 major areas of concern. First, they show that over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files. That information includes names, addresses, phone numbers, political party preferences, and other sensitive data that would be needed to register to vote and engage in other nefarious activities, which is exactly what was happening. This data loss presents an unprecedented election security nightmare. The intelligence even shows that China assigned a data exploitation unit specifically to this new project. Compounding the travesty, the second set of documents we are releasing reveals that members of the deep state, very, very famous group of people, in many cases, in our intelligence agency work to actively suppress and downplay information about the extent of China's sinister election meddling, covering it up from both the president and the American people like nobody thought was possible. U.S. spy agencies began learning about the compromise of voter registration files in 2020 when they discovered that tens of millions of voter data, think of that, tens of millions of voters' data in 18 states have been bought, stolen, or hacked by China. Yet those responsible for sounding the alarm instead kept the information secret and hidden. They did not disclose to me as president or to anyone else, and to the best of our knowledge, they did not inform Congress. In fact, all they kept saying is, this is the most secure election in the history of our country. A standard, very pat line that was divvied out to say. The cover-up of this colossal security breach is even more disturbing in light of the additional information showing that China engaged in other election-related activities to undermine my first administration and our 2020 campaign. They did not want, and they just didn't want it. They fought like hell not to have it, Donald Trump, to win, and for good reason. As the documents we are releasing show, CIA reporting explicitly stated, and I quote, in mid-2018, the Chinese Communist Party's policy was to leverage all domestic and foreign elements that were opposed to the U.S. president in an effort to reduce the U.S. president's votes and make him resign or prevent his re-election. Isn't that nice? Also, in mid-2018, China was working to influence the results of the U.S. midterm elections and later the results of the 2020 presidential election itself. Separately, in mid-2019, the Chinese government's strategy against the United States was focused on undermining domestic confidence in the U.S. president. They wanted to just make you sound like your president wasn't so hot, when actually your president has done a great job, and they did everything possible to do exactly that. Going on, this document says, and this is by the CIA, the strategy included efforts to use Chinese contacts with big U.S. companies to influence U.S. business leaders to turn against the President of the United States of America. The Chinese government sought to identify U.S. journalists who had reported negatively on the U.S. president and pay them large sums of money to write more negative articles about him, as many as they could, and they didn't care what they said. The Chinese government wanted U.S. president to lose the next election, and the reason they wanted me to lose is because they knew I was wise to them, charged them billions and billions of dollars worth of tariffs, and built the strongest military anywhere in the world. We have the strongest military anywhere in the world. These are exact quotes from the CIA reporting. The name of the person doing the quote is now under review, but it gets even worse. Raw intelligence obtained by the FBI in 2020, yet buried by rogue bureaucrats, stated that China's activities even included an attempt to manufacture illegal ballots for Joe Biden. Documents show that during this period, dozens of significant CIA and NSA reports about China's election targeting were kept out of the presidential briefing. These were briefings I would get almost every day. Everything was kept out that was of importance. One email among intelligence analysts admitted that they had, quote, deliberately massaged the presidential daily briefing to withhold information regarding Chinese activities related to the election. Another official inside the FBI wrote that she was running, quote, a shadow government, unquote, to keep intelligence about China's election meddling from becoming known and to keep it away from the honorable press. Other officials who witnessed such efforts perceived the motivations to be blatantly political. Recently, we found significant numbers of burn bags in formation, and this is a group of bags that were used to destroy information given by President Barack Hussein Obama to be burned. It was supposed to be burned. These bags were supposed to be at a different level by different people, incinerated and checked, but it never happened. Maybe we got lucky. We believe this was not done on purpose, but rather through gross incompetence of the people that were supposed to burn the bags. But the findings are stunning. Today, I'm asking the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the CIA to investigate how and why such crucial information was hidden, to fire those involved in the cover-up, and to file criminal charges, if appropriate, against these people. Yet concealing China's meddling was only the beginning. The third set of documents we are releasing proves that for many years, Americans were blatantly lied to about the security of our election infrastructure, including electronic voting machines and ballot counting systems. Dishonest, almost all. They're vulnerable and they're easily compromised, and people within our government knew that. Tonight, we're publishing a series of previously classified U.S. intelligence community assessments and other reports proving that our government has long known these machines are extremely exposed to attack. As one assessment states, we judge that the United States adversaries, including at a minimum Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, as well as non-state groups, have the capability to compromise U.S. election infrastructure. That's unquote, but that's some statement, isn't it? Made by supposedly great patriots of our country. The document goes on to further state that, quote, we assess that centralized election-related data repositories, such as voter registration databases, poll books, and other official election websites, are most vulnerable to exploitation, and adversaries could use this access to these systems to disrupt election processes within the United States of America. Tonight, we're releasing all of those findings, and spanning from January 2020 to June 2026. This is a cyber threat aimed at the very heart of our democracy. Many people have questioned whether it could actually be possible to electronically manipulate vote totals or change election results on these terrible machines. Today, we are releasing documents that show the CIA obtained reporting of a specific plot to do a big number in favor of the corrupt Maduro regime in Venezuela. And that's exactly what happened, conspiring to digitally rig their own country's elections in 2020, and that's what they did. This reporting included precise details about methods to regime develop to digitally alter vote totals in ways that could not be detected even with an audit, no matter how deep they went. This intelligence underscores why we must take urgent action to ensure that our own system can never, ever be hacked or compromised like it was in the past. The fourth set of documents reveals that even when significant evidence of fraud has been detected, it has been buried and covered up. Among the disclosures tonight are FBI files detailing evidence of alleged fraud by a large-scale voter registration operation in Michigan. In 2020, Michigan State Police raided a Democrat Get Out the Vote organization, corrupt group in Muskegon. And we're so concerned by what they found. They were just so concerned, they couldn't believe it, actually, that they contacted the FBI in Detroit. The documents state that some canvassers admitted to FBI agents that they signed voter registration forms in other people's names, submitted fraudulent registration for people who did not exist, and received gift cards tied to their number of applications that they produced. In other words, it was pay, play, and cheat. The FBI agents working on the case believe that crimes were committed, yet the Biden Department of Justice slow-walked the investigation and killed it. Tonight, I'm asking the FBI director to ensure that the matter is fully investigated and to work with the Department of Justice to prosecute those responsible for any crimes. Finally, to reveal just how vulnerable our elections continue to be, we are releasing the results of a stunning investigation by the Department of Homeland Security. According to the DHS review of state voter rolls and public records, they identified approximately 278,000 non-citizens who are registered to vote in federal elections. Since Democrat states refuse to share their voter files, the real number is actually much higher than that. Yet, even this limited analysis found more than 250,000 foreigners illegally registered to vote. Put together, these disclosures reveal an election system so broken and so vulnerable that no one can possibly defend it. It is not defensible. Hundreds of millions of U.S. voter files are in the hands of foreign governments. Our machines and ballot counting systems are exposed to hacking and manipulation and corruption. China and other countries have been trying to meddle in our elections. Evidence of fraud has been buried. Hundreds of thousands of non-citizens and dead people are listed and active on the voter rolls, and yet we still have elections with no voter ID, no proof of citizenship, and tens of millions of ballots floating aimlessly through the mail. As one example of the insanity, California's recent election for mayor of LA and governor was held on June 2nd, a long time ago, but it was just completed a few days ago on July 10th. Think of that, much more than 1 month. Took a month to count the votes. I wonder what they were doing. This is worse than any third world country. There's no third world country that has elections like we have. In a rare move, NBC and ABC Fake News have both said that they would not cover this speech. They knew what it was about because of the fact that they don't like the topic, because they know how corrupt our system is and they don't want to reveal it. They and others in the media are part of a plot. They want to continue this fraud for whatever reason. They want to keep it going. They want to protect the radical left. They can't have a great country, and that's true. You can't have a great country without free and fair elections. Fraud like this should mean a revocation of their licenses. They use our public multi-billion-dollar in value airways for absolutely no money. They pay nothing. All we want is honesty in our elections and honesty in reporting. They pay nothing for multi-billion-dollar assets. Great damage has been done to our country. Our elections were left vulnerable to being rigged and stolen. and the trust of the American people was lost. This cannot be allowed to continue. Every American, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, or otherwise, should be able to agree that we deserve the most secure, honest, and fair election system anywhere in the world. Secure elections should be a partisan, really, we should be together, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everybody. And it should not be a partisan issue. It should cause to unite us, not to divide us. This should be a cause. We should be united, not divided. In light of the brand new and irrefutable information I have revealed tonight, my administration is in the process of notifying the states whose election data was compromised by the People's Republic of China and many others. We will be working closely to mitigate any harm, and we're taking swift action to ensure that sensitive voter data is better protected so we can never be bought, we can never be hacked, and we can never watch a stolen election again. Tomorrow, the Secretary of Homeland Security will hold a briefing to outline his department's recent work confirming cyber vulnerabilities in our electronic voting systems. They are bad. We're in the process of informing governors, senators, and members of Congress of potential issues in their states. If you look at voting today, it's in such bad shape in so many states, and we are committing to fix it. And we're also committing to be working with those states and local jurisdictions to help them fix and patch known technical vulnerabilities before the midterm elections. We have very important elections coming up. We want those elections to be honest. I've also ordered DHS to notify every state about non-citizens on their voter rolls and direct them to remove all ineligible voters from the lists immediately. But most importantly, addressing this crisis of election security demands that Congress must pass the Save America Act. How easy is that to do unless you want to cheat? The only reason you wouldn't do it is you want to cheat because your policies are so bad and your candidates are so pathetic that you can't get away or can't get elected any other way. This landmark bill requires that all voters must show photo voter ID. How simple is that? Could I have your photo, please? Photo voter ID. All voters must provide proof of citizenship. Are you a citizen of our country, please? And hopefully there will be no corrupt mail-in ballots, which if you watched California and so many other places, mail-in ballots are inherently corrupt. So you would have no mail-in ballots except for illness, disability, military deployment, or travel if you're going away on business or vacation. These reforms are urgently needed to stop the vulnerabilities that I've mentioned. To all Americans, I ask you to pick up your phone tomorrow, call your representatives in the House and Senate, and demand that they pass the Save America Act without delay. Together we will restore faith and confidence in our country, and we will be bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. Thank you. God bless you. God bless our great military, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Well, you folks, we've been taking notes. I would venture to guess our panel has been taking notes. We will be joined also not only by Mike Lindell here in a moment and Dan Eastman, but we will be joined by attorney Sidney Powell in just one moment as well, all responding to the president's speech. I was taking notes as fast as I could on all that. I hope many of you were as well. But since we're going to be joined by Mike Lindell, Sidney Powell, Dan Eastman, Garland Favorito, am I leaving anybody out? What a lineup. Tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, True Social. Let everybody know that this is the lineup we're about to have to discuss what many are saying was going to be, and I think we can say, is indeed a historic speech by the president. One of the ones that jumped out at me before we go to the panel is that We had key people in the deep state scrubbing from the president's daily security briefing that China was hacking on our elections, that they were printing ballots, they were manufacturing ballots. There are people in the intelligence arena trying to hide this, a government inside a government, he said. And then the burn bags to destroy info. Somehow the info didn't get destroyed. He says it was probably incompetence, but they got lucky. And the findings are, quote, stunning, end quote. Apparently and reportedly, that was to be done at the direction of Obama or his lead people. These bags of information put in burn bags, they were never burned. He went on and on. The information is available, we're told, at whitehouse.gov. We're going to go there in just one moment when we can. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get a response. Let's go to who we have with us. Mike Lindell. We have Sydney and Dan right now. Let's do that. Apparently, by the way, get a hold of Logan. Our apps on our Roku are going in and out. I think we might be hitting a bandwidth. We're check and see, get our IT, see if we need to buy more bandwidth or add another server or something. But apparently we're hitting record numbers again. Joining me now is Dan Eastman and Sidney Powell. Sidney, welcome. Thank you for joining us by phone tonight. Were you taking notes? And if so, what jumped out at you the most tonight in this speech by President Trump?
I was trying to take notes, but I was hoping he was going to talk a little slower and more detailed. He was going so fast, I had a hard time keeping up. But one of the things that most impressed me was the recognition, apparently in writing, that the FBI officials were running a shadow government to hide the information about China's interference in our election, and that China was even trying to print ballots and may have printed some. We had information about that back in 2020. And I want to remind everybody also, there was a CISA FBI finding that came out the day of the election, November 3rd of 2020, finding Iran was a persistent threat actor and had accessed state voter databases in at least one state and pulled that information. And now we hear that 220 million voter files went to China.
And then he also was saying that the voter information in 18 states they have has been compromised. 18 states, Dan Eastman.
Well, that's a story that's been around a long time. Hi, Sydney. It's great to hear you.
Hey, Dan.
Back in 2020, when we filed our complaint here in Wisconsin, Sidney Powell was her famous Kraken case in Wisconsin. The exhibits to that complaint made it very clear that all of the things President Trump talked about tonight were in our complaint, and we offered proof to that effect. And of course, we never got an evidentiary hearing. Jill Stein, 4 years earlier in 2016, she got an evidentiary hearing in Wisconsin, and Alex Halderman and Professor Stark and Professor Rivest, they all had a chance to testify. So as President Trump was rattling off his list of 5 elements, I'm sitting here going, yep, all the way down the line, because this information has been known. And like I talked about in the beginning of the program, in 2010, we have that letter from the Voter Action Group in 2010 alleging that China was interacting with our election systems. That was 16 years ago. So there have been we in the field have been toiling away and pounding at this message for a very long time that our systems are compromised. And when you think about 220 million voter records, those are the citizens, the people in our neighborhood, you and I. Our information is now living in China because it's valuable to the Chinese to be able to control the most powerful government on earth. They don't have to do it with their military. All they have to do it is through insertion into our government and to control our government. That's terrifying for any American to think about. So it's a great platform that President Trump has introduced tonight. And I'm very eager to read the files, but I suspect some of them will be rather familiar. So it's a good thing.
Well, that is a good thing they're familiar to you, and that's why we're so happy that you're on our team and you broadcast with us each and every day, the Eastman Report at, help me out here with the time.
No, 11:30 to 12 Central East.
11:30 to 12 Central every day.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
You would think I would know my own network schedule, but there's a lot of guys out here. 11:30 Central each and every day, the Eastman Report. So he's been covering those. He's been working with Sidney Powell for years on this. And I want to go to the screenshot here. This is the Director of National Intelligence, the unclassified report from January 7th, 2021. John Ratcliffe, as DNI, was warning about China hacking on our elections, the 2020 elections. This came out January 7th, 2021. Sadly, it was largely ignored by many, and we kept having people saying, Sidney, that the elections, and President Trump mentioned it tonight, deservedly so, in a mocking manner, because I think it was Chris Krebs who said it was the safest election in history, something to that effect. Correct, Sidney?
Right. What a farce. What a liar. Just unbelievable. One of the things that really bothered me about Ratcliffe's report was the fact that it didn't come out until January 7th after the ordeal in Congress on January 6th. It should have come out before that, and I think other people in the intelligence community helped delay it. I'm looking forward to seeing more evidence of what happened about that.
Well, the president made reference tonight that maybe charges are coming for some of these people. I'm assuming as attorneys, you both picked up on that. You first, Sidney?
Yes, I definitely heard that. I'm greatly encouraged by that because what happened was a coup of the United States of America. I knew that at the time. I could see it. I could smell it. Like Rudy, it's a fraud case. It's a massive fraud case. And not a single judge, not a single federal judge across the country in our 4 cases would listen to the first witness testify. So the skids were greased to shut all that down somehow, some way, and I still don't know how, but maybe we'll find out in these documents.
Dan Eastman, before we go to bring Garland Favorito in here, and we're waiting to Mike Lindell to get back in if he can. And we might be joined by Dr. Doug Frank at some point as well. But Sidney makes a great point. These cases, they were so hard to get into the courts. People were told all the time, you don't have standing, you don't have standing. And so people would say, well, if there was voter fraud, where are the court cases? Where are the verdicts? Where are the trials we can hear? You and I have talked about that so many times. And as an attorney, speak to our audience about that, who family and friends would tell them, well, it must not be anything to it, because if there would be trials and court cases that we could go to.
Well, it's a shameful thing because in 2016, Jill Stein was the Green Party candidate. And in Wisconsin, she got 1% of the vote and filed for a recount. Well, that's absurd. Well, Hillary Clinton was funding it, as we find out from an SEC complaint. But the point is, they made allegations in court that the Russians and the Iranians had hacked the machines, and they were demanding a hand recount of all 3 million ballots cast. And of course, the judge said you can have the recount, but you have to use the machines, because that's what the WEX is, our Wisconsin Election Commission. But the judge said in her order, I think the hand count is typically viewed as the gold standard for accuracy if it's well done. And that's Judge Valerie Bailey Wren, who's a relatively liberal judge in Dane County, fine jurist, excellent person, retiring this year. But she gave them an evidentiary hearing. And Dr. Haldeman, Alex Haldeman, one of our key witnesses, was allowed to testify. And Professor Rivest from MIT, not necessarily a community college, was allowed to testify on electronic security. And then Professor Stark from Berkeley, California University, was allowed to testify on statistics, how statistically it was impossible that Hillary Clinton could have lost to Donald Trump. We brought those same witnesses to the same courts, well, the federal court in Wisconsin in 2020, and we didn't get into the courthouse. They did not want to hear the same experts that they had listened to 4 years earlier. And mind you, these experts have resumes that are stellar. They certainly would survive a Daubert challenge. These are smart people. And they got an evidentiary hearing in 2016, but by 2020, that door was closed. And Sidney is a very, very noble warrior. I mean, she has gone through literally the gates of Hades on this issue over things that were allowed 4 years earlier. So it's a real double standard. But by the time 2020 rolled around, the door was closed and nobody wanted to hear anything about rigged elections. But the evidence stands firm. And there are so many affidavits and declarations and statements in our exhibits from that case that have not been debunked. They have not been disproven. As a matter of fact, if Doug Frank comes on tonight, he was one of them. And the thing is, we have had the evidence since 2016 and 2020, and we are here we are 6 years later still battling. So you pray that there will be indictments and that the Justice Department will finally bring justice. Because if we don't have honest elections in America, we don't have a republic and we don't have a democracy. We have some sort of an oligarchy of very powerful interests that are doing more and more damage to the individuals in our society at their own profit. You look at the data centers, you look at, the whole COVID thing with the masks and all of the pharmaceuticals. We, the people, are losing control of our government, and we will end up the same subjects that we were in 1776 under George III, only with technology. It's going to be much more terrifying than taxing your cup of tea, let me tell you.
You bring up a very good point, Dan Eastman, and Garland Favorito. I want to bring him in, voterga.org. Garland, Dan brings up a very good point here. He actually brought it up while I was thinking of my question to ask him, and I guess we're both on the same wavelength because he said it. He said that word, data centers, because I'm sitting here thinking, as he was saying, if this problem isn't corrected, what is going to happen? And I thought, data centers. If we're talking about major tech companies and data centers, some of them who, according to news reports, have been working with our intelligence community and the military-industrial complex for some time on the, quote, war on terror. If some of these same companies, which already have apparently embedded themselves inside our government and intelligence arenas, if they get involved in any way with the voting system, would they not, and I'm not accusing anybody, I'm not putting bad motives on anyone. I just know human nature, right? All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. There's no one good, no, not one. So I'm thinking to myself, if you give people the power to handle the elections electronically, wouldn't these guys have the skill set to make sure there's no footprint so that there would be no accountability? I mean, if they're that smart, these are the smartest people in the world, some of them, when it comes to computers. Do you really want the government running these elections with the help of, quote, data centers, etc.?
Well, no, for quite a few reasons, Brannon. First of all, you don't want machines at all involved in this. Number one. Number 10, one of the reasons, and Sydney could really tell you a lot about this as well. I'm glad she's on. But so none of these systems have been hardened, whether we're talking about a voting system, which is supposed to be critical infrastructure compliant, or whether we're talking about a data center. Those systems are not hardened to the point where they could be trusted. And by that, I mean, they have components in them from China. Almost every voting system, in fact, has Chinese components. So they're not secure enough to be running an election. They should be forced to comply with the Defense Production Act, the FISMA Act, Federal Information Security Modernization Act, and so on. And none of them do. So the bottom line is we shouldn't be using them because they need to have all American parts. They have to be tested. Your friend Sean Smith and mine can tell you what they went through at DOD to test something that was not American made. It's just an amazing process. Well, we don't even care here, and I'm about what we're doing right now. And I'm so glad that Trump is really showing now that he is going to, I think, take this to where it needs to go, because we have a national security crisis right now.
What jumped out at you, Garland, the most out of tonight's speech?
Well, we just issued a press release I sent over to Logan. I'd love to go through that with you, Brannon, at the appropriate time. I think it would be the Chinese connections, number one. But number two, and closely behind it, would be the elections, the intelligence officials who covered up this. And I'm thinking back on to the 2016 reports that Tulsi Gabbard released when she explained that John Brennan had changed a national security assessment at the direction of Barack Obama to show that there was Russian influence. So I would think there was, those would be number one and number two. We put out all 5 points in that press release. But if I could sum it up, I think there's 3 things here. Number one, the documents, when they're all released, and we think there is about 10 million of these intelligence pages of intelligence documents that are going to be released as part of this whole thing. Number one, they're going to prove that Donald Trump has been right all along about election security. Number one. Number two, the most chilling aspect is the election officials have been the intelligence officials and FBI have been involved in the cover-up of all this. So those are probably the two amazing takeaways from all this that I would get tonight, in addition to all the other amazing things in regards to the voter rolls and everything else that he talked about.
Sydney, he mentioned President Trump tonight, China manufacturing ballots. Again, a lot of people think voting machines. Well, my area doesn't have voting machines, as Mike Lindell brought up tonight, but it's generally a machine that is counting them. And if you have China manufacturing ballots, and then he mentioned in Michigan, you had people that were selling their ballots for gift cards. Speak to this issue.
Well, I think that happens more across the country than just Michigan. I think that happened all across the country, of people selling their votes or selling their ballots and people harvesting them and putting in what they wanted for them. The thought of China manufacturing ballots is terrifying because the ballots can be manufactured in such a way with a barcode that causes them to vote for somebody the person didn't vote for. That's a huge problem, or not to read certain votes, depending on how the ballot is done. None of that is acceptable, but I think the most important point, and I didn't hear the president say this, we can have no computerized voting at all and have a free and fair election. There is no computer that cannot be hacked or programmed in the first place to defraud the people of their votes. And the programs for it can be written in such a way that you cannot tell it was ever there. And the information on that goes back to Clint Curtis testifying in front of I think it was the House committee in 2004, sitting in Ohio, because of the fraud alleged against the Bush team there, about how he wrote an algorithm that ate itself as it flipped votes for Bush in Florida in 2004.
Let's see if we can get the Clint Curtis video clip, guys. We have it somewhere in our archive. I want to have you all respond to this. I mentioned it today on radio at 1 o'clock Central in my commentary for the Worldview Report tonight. It's a letter that I stumbled on in my research, a few years ago, and it is from December 10th, 2020. It's a letter on congressional letterhead by Congressman Bill Posey of Florida. The letter was to then the Inspector General of the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, and I think it was CC'd to then CIA Director Gina. And in this letter, I want to read a little bit of it. Here's what he says, and I think President Trump made reference to this tonight. Again, notice this is 2020. But before I read this, by the way, this Mr. Peter M. Thompson, he was appointed. I don't think he went on to fulfill the job after President Trump, quote, lost, end quote, the election, after it was stolen, I believe we could say now. This gentleman moved on. They didn't want him there. I am told today that he is the Inspector General now, right now. So the guy that received this letter from Congressman Bill Posey in 2020, I'm told is now the Inspector General tonight of the CIA. I'm also wanting to point out that the guy that wrote the letter in January 7th of 2021, DNI director on China hacking, is tonight the CIA director. So you seem to have some people who have knowledge of this and concerns of this going back some time. The Trump administration, number one, ended. Well, now we have Mr. Peter Thompson, I'm told, back as Inspector General of the CIA. We have John Ratcliffe as CIA director. But look at what Mr. Posey said in his letter back in 2020. When I stumbled on this, by the way, I called one of his congressional staffers, said, here's who I am, here's who I work with, here's what we're doing. He said, can I conference in another staffer? I said, sure. They conferenced in another guy. They were quite excited that they'd gotten hold of a media company that wanted this. They began to fill up my email box with information that they'd been uncovering. Look at what Congressman Posey wrote in 2020. Quote, my understanding is that the origins of Smartmatic began in Venezuela under the regime of Hugo Chavez. The election software was used for the presidential elections that President Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro won. In each of those elections, opposition parties claimed that fraud occurred. In fact, a 2013 U.S. Department of State country report on Venezuela states in the executive summary that, quote, authorities announced that Nicolas Maduro had won the presidency by a 1.49% margin amid allegations of pre- and post-election fraud based on a number of irregularities, including government interference, the use of state resources by the ruling party, and voter manipulation, end quote. The congressman then writes, furthermore, in a recent sworn affidavit filed with a Georgia election lawsuit, a key witness describes firsthand accounts of how Hugo Chavez asked Smartmatic to design a new election system for Venezuela and, quote, was most insistent that Smartmatic design the system in a way that the system could change the vote of each voter without being detected, end quote. The congressman writes, I understand that Smartmatic went on to participate in every Venezuelan election until 2018. The witness goes on to state that in 2013 election, the, quote, Smartmatic electoral management system was used to manipulate and change the results of the person to succeed Hugo Chavez. It is concerning, writes the congressman, that the creation of such a system could have circumvented the will of the Venezuelan people and contributed to keeping Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro in power while their people suffered greatly. Knowing of the origins of Smartmatic software, was the Central Intelligence Agency aware of its use in Dominion equipment during previous U.S. elections and the 2020 general election? Question mark. If so, did the CIA report the vulnerabilities of this software to other federal agencies or states? Question mark. Has the Inspector General's office conducted a national security investigation on the CIA's connection, if any, with Smartmatic, Seidel, or other companies associated with the election software or hardware? Question mark. Did foreign actors interfere in our election in states that use this questionable software? Question mark. And finally, please provide all relevant documents that deal with the above question. The citizens of the United States need assurance that a free and fair election occurred. Without a legitimate investigation by the CIA Inspector General, the outcome of the election results will be questioned by many Americans. Therefore, I urge you to fully investigate the CIA's role involving these election companies, end quote. Sydney, I'll go to you first. What I find most striking is that the congressman was asking a lot of questions. Then he stopped. And his last statement was, quote, therefore, I urge you to fully investigate the CIA's role involving these election companies. He stopped asking questions and he ended with a statement. Tonight, we heard from the president that it sounds like the CIA, some folks there at the FBI, other agencies in the intel arena, were deliberately hiding this information and keeping it off the president's daily briefing. So it looks like the congressman may have been onto something. Sydney?
It certainly does. I mean, I have maintained since 2020, when all this happened, that it could not have happened without at least the knowledge of the CIA and the NSA and probably other factions of our government. It certainly could have been facilitated by a few rogue people in those departments, but somebody in our government had to know what was going on here. There is a patent that allows real-time monitoring of an election. It sounds very much like what the witness described seeing in Venezuela. If people want to know more about this, they can find it at defendingtherepublic.org, where we posted full copies of our multi-hundred-page filings, including the evidence that we attached to them, and read the affidavits for yourself, the affidavits that the judges would not allow witnesses to testify to. They are absolutely damning. We have the affidavit of the young man from Venezuela who said he literally stood there and watched it be done. and lots of other affidavits too, including one that we call the Spider affidavit, which has some errors at the beginning of it. But the basic premise of it is right, and it shows the IP addresses that were logging into our election information on election night, including several addresses from China and Serbia and Iran and other places.
And that's at defendingtherepublic.org?
Yes.
I won't say the individual's name, but there was an individual that attended my Worldview Weekend Training Institute, which was all day Friday, all day Saturday. We had various people inside the government coming to our training. They weren't there to spy on us. We knew who they were. One of them, I stayed in their home. He was an active FBI agent at the time. We had an active IRS agent, active NSA agent, active FBI agent, all attending my training because these were very committed Christians that wanted to come to my all day Friday, all day Saturday biblical worldview training I was doing here in the Mid-South. Well, this one individual was with the NSA and attended many of our conferences. In addition to my training, attended many of our conferences. After the 2020 election, I was speaking about the CIA and the intelligence arena hacking on our elections, why I believed it was so, giving the information that some of it I just presented right then, and talking about practicing a color revolution overseas and then bringing it home, something I and others were warning about in the summer of 2020 before I had even met Mike Lindell later that fall. This, at the time, active NSA agent who was literally counting down the days to retire and has now since retired, came up to me at the end of my presentation and said, what you just said about the NSA, CIA, intel agencies practicing color revolutions and hacking elections overseas, practicing and bringing it home, you are so over the target. You need to keep saying that. I can't tell you anymore. This is what they said, because I don't want to go to jail. But what you just said, you need to keep saying that because you are more right than you actually know. And I think a lot of us have had people either inside the government or who had left these agencies telling us this kind of thing, but because of things that they had signed and the type of things they were doing, they could not say much more than that. But then in my research, and I'll have you guys respond, right after this document I discovered online from Congressman Bill Posey from 2020, and I kept researching this more, and the CIA's role in elections, I found this from the Washington Times a few years ago. May 1984, headline, Helms says CIA rigged elections in El Salvador. Now I'm just going to paraphrase it for the sake of time. People can screenshot that and read it later. But he said, Senator Jesse Helms at the time of North Carolina, U.S. Senator, that the State Department and the CIA were involved in basically stealing the election for a socialist, for him, installing a socialist in El Salvador by providing money, by training technical advice, funds, and computer voter registration systems that disenfranchised 20% of the voters the first time around. That's 1984. This is not a new problem, is it, Dan?
No, it certainly isn't. And I think you're going back to 1984 and 2010 and all throughout the modern history after the hanging Chad episode back in the Bush-Gore era. We've moved to an electronic platform, and voice after voice after voice has been warning us that these systems are vulnerable. And when you think about it, when you live in a district and you vote, whether it's county or however your state is structured, that's a monopoly on your voting area. We buy these systems by the county in Wisconsin. It's a monopoly. You don't have a choice of which machine you use to cast your ballot. You're stuck with whatever the government has gone through the process of purchasing and installing and training and how they're using it. It's a monopoly, and governments are very inertia laden. They don't like to switch systems because you've got to start training and it costs money and time. So these systems, and when you look at our tabulators, they're quite antiquated. The machines themselves, these things were invented a long time ago. It doesn't look like modern technology at all. So that's the installed infrastructure. Well, then you layer on the intelligence community and their ability and their task to go out into the world and change the world for the betterment of America. You've given them the tools they need to come back home. And you know, the intelligence community is an interesting place. It's very, very hard to get into that community, and it's impossible to get out. You get in and then you die. You don't get out. So that institution, multiple institutions, have become a thing unto themselves. If you go back to George Washington and the Culpeper Group, the president said, maybe I got to have some spies running around so I know what's going on. The whole idea of the intelligence community, even through World War II, was to advise the president of what was going on so the president could make better decisions. Well, since 1945 and the advent of the modern technology and the modern intelligence community, that is an organization and a community unto itself. And you could argue that every world government is at risk because they have the tools, the technique, and the skills to make election outcomes happen. And this is something that's not under control. So when you think about the president, you go back to the Bush administrations, and you go back to Ronald Reagan, and then all the way through, you see that somebody's elected president. They're probably I hate to be disrespectful, but they might be the dumbest person in the room for a few weeks because they're not in the presidency that long. Well, who do you rely on? You rely on the establishment to guide you in your decision making. But if that establishment has an agenda and guides you to make decisions that are consistent with the agenda rather than the agenda of the popularly elected president, that becomes a real problem. That we have, in effect, a captured executive. And that needs to be dealt with, but it's a very difficult problem. I mean, how do you get inside of something when you have a Congress full of incompetence that can't stop spending $2.5 trillion a year they don't collect, and you have a president that comes in and out every 4 years, and you have a Supreme Court that's really not focused on the administration of government? How do you reel that in? And it may be too late because that entity and that community has taken on a life of its own globally. And we're reacting to that. So I'm very eager to see what the president's going to release, whether it's rogue elements within the CIA or whether it is the CIA or pick a spook group. This is a real problem for our democracy.
You want to comment on all that?
One of my big concerns is that in the view of one of our witnesses, the DNA of all the machines is essentially the same, that it doesn't matter which one is used, they all have the same vulnerabilities because they're all computers. And at least what we've been told in the view of our witnesses is they all essentially use the same codes and whatever to do what they do. As long as a computer is being used, not only can it be hacked, but it can be programmed to do something it shouldn't do from the very beginning. That's the biggest risk, I think. But we have known since the old Diebold machines that deliberately had a back door in them for people to access to change the vote. It's been going on, like Dan and Garland just said, for a very long time, since the first computer came in, probably.
I mentioned
we had
earlier,
LBJ
Sydney,
who used to throw ballot boxes off the back of the pickup truck going across the Pedernales River to help fix the votes for him,
right,
or harvest names from graveyard tombstones. So, election fraud's been around forever, but the advent of the computer has simply multiplied the problems ginormously.
Bev Harris, I mentioned this earlier, Sydney, before you came on. Bev Harris in her book, Black Box Voting, was talking about this going on back in the 90s, right?
Exactly. I would say she was the pioneer of uncovering all this. And then Stephen Spoonemore, who worked on the case in 2004 in Ohio. There are a lot of videos at defendingtherepublic.org that Spoonemore did explaining what happened in Ohio. Think of a vote as a dollar bill. Would we allow this kind of thing to happen in a bank? Allow errors of giant percentages? There's just absolutely no reason why our votes cannot be counted accurately, but I'm firmly convinced that a hand count is the only way to do that.
Indeed. I want to play the Clint Curtis clip. If you guys, Logan, can tell me what minute mark to play it. It's 9 minutes. So tell me what minute mark I need to start at, please, to get the best for the sake of time. We won't keep everybody much longer, but this is clearly a big issue. It needs, obviously, as you guys have all said, if we're going to be a free society, maintain the republic, we have to have free and fair elections. We're now watching the rise of candidates. They're Islamic candidates rising. They're, taking over Texas. They're targeting Tennessee. They're taking over Minneapolis, St. Paul. They're taking over, obviously, Michigan. They're rising. We have the Socialist Democrats of America rising. That's nonstop talk. But that red-green axis, the red being the Marxist, the green being the Islamist, if they start and they continue putting up all their candidates, and man alive, you guys ought to understand how many Islamic candidates we have running. And I'm not anti-Muslim. I have no problem with the beer-drinking, pork-eating Muslims. My friend Shahram Hadian's daddy was a beer-drinking, pork-eating Muslim, and he got his family out of Iran 6 weeks before the fall of the Shah because he didn't want to live under Islamic law. My issue is with Islam. And you look at all those candidates running at the state and local and federal level, add it with the Socialist Democrats of America, if we don't get this election system under control, those kind of people are going to be the ones winning and getting into the seats. Garland?
Well, Sydney, I think Sydney summed up the solution in one sentence. She said, basically, you have to publicly record hand count the results, and then there is no dispute as to who won. So all these candidates and the Marxists and everything that are winning, when you have no platform that appeals to the people, and yet they end up winning. Well, the problem is, to Sydney's point, is that we're conducting secretly counted elections on secret proprietary software, and then we secretly preserve the ballots and tell the people who won. Who on their right mind would accept this as normal in a constitutional republic?
Yep. Absolutely. All right. I had to try to get control of everybody in the control room, and I got that clip to play. But let's bring in real quick. Can you let me know when you have Doug Frank ready to come in, and then we'll get ready to wrap because I don't want to go too late for everybody, particularly those on the East Coast. Let me know when you got Doug. In the meantime, I've been told by Logan, start at the beginning. Here is Clint Curtis. He's taking an oath in court. Listen to what he's about to say.
Mr. Curtis, would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Clinton Eugene Curtis.
And where do you reside?
Tallahassee, Florida.
And what is your profession?
I'm a computer programmer.
Would you please speak into the microphone so the audience can hear your testimony?
I'm a computer programmer.
Mr. Curtis, are there programs that can be used to secretly fix elections?
Yes.
How do you know that to be the case?
Because in October of 2000, I wrote a prototype for Congressman Tom Feeney at the company I work for in Oviedo, Florida, that did just that.
And when you say did just that, it would rig an election?
It would flip the vote 51-49 to whoever you wanted it to go to and whichever race you wanted to win.
And would that program that you designed be something that elections officials that might be on county boards of elections could detect?
They'd never see it.
Would you answer that question once again?
They would never see it.
So how would such a program, a secret program that fixes the election, how could it be detected?
You would have to view it either in the source code, or you'd have to have a receipt and then count the hard paper against the actual vote total. Other than that, you won't see it.
All right, Mr. Curtis, if you had been asked, you or others with your professional expertise had been asked to design a protected program that would protect the Ohio elections from against such software to fix the election, could you have done so?
If we've been asked to make a program that can fix the election, sure, anybody can do it.
No, could you have designed a program or a procedure or a protocol that would have protected Ohio against this kind of rigging?
No, you have to look at the source code. You have to.
All right, we'll hold it there. So that gives you an idea. Joining us now also is Dr. Doug Frank. Dr. Frank, thank you for being with us tonight. Did you watch the president's speech? I guess that goes without saying, but I want to make sure you had a chance. I know you were speaking somewhere tonight.
Yeah, I'm speaking in Wisconsin, and at the end of my meeting, which ended at 8, we switched over, and all of us, and half the people are still here, watched the speech together. And then I did a short interview with Hwang Kyo-ahn, the former prime minister of South Korea. Big news there. And then I joined you here.
Excellent. Well, thank you. What do you make of the 220 million U.S. voter files that the CCP got a hold of? The largest compromise, said the president tonight, of an election, 220 million U.S. voter files grabbed by the CCP. How does that fit with your analysis? You sat at this desk. We filmed you talking about census data and it being, you say, injected into the voter rolls and then used to vote for people. How does your thesis from back that 5-6 years ago at this very news desk in this studio fit with what the president's saying tonight, the CCP having 220 million voter rolls? Do those line up?
Perfectly. And it was fun as he was talking about the different ways that the voter rolls were being abused. And I had just given a talk to an audience where I showed exactly what he described happening in Wisconsin. I know I see Dan Eastman here as well. He heard my presentation 2 days ago, and he knows exactly what I was explaining in Wisconsin that was happening is exactly what the president was referring to tonight. So it's nice to have, like official confirmation of
what are you referring to? I think those of us who have not heard your speech don't really know what it is you're referring to. Give us a little more background.
Well, what I showed is that if you give somebody in advance all the voter rolls, and then you give somebody during the election access to the tallies in real time, that they can manipulate the rolls and manipulate the tallies to produce a certain outcome. You just played Clint Curtis's discussion of that. You can produce a certain outcome. So when I was with you at your desk there in 2021, I said I had proven that every state in America had centrally controlled elections, and they were using the census data and the voter roll data in a centralized way. And all I had to do was look at one county in any state in America, and I could predict all of the other counties in that state. And I went state to state across America. At the time I was with you, I had only done about a dozen states so far, but I've since done every state in America. And what I've been able to do is to prove if you have real-time cyber access to the election information, you can prepare ahead of time, but then during the election, you can manipulate the outcomes. And I proved in that talk, scientific proof that you produced that movie, that if you could control, if you could have access, that you can manipulate the outcomes. And I proved all I had to do was look at one county in any state, and I could predict every other county in that state.
Now you were talking census, the census, yes. Right? Okay. Compare that though to the voter rolls, 220 million U.S. voter files. How does that add up? Because what would again, keep it simple. I know you're a mathematician, you got PhDs and everything, but you were talking the census data, right? So the census data is going to vote for a lot of people that never even vote. They're just on the census rolls, not necessarily the voter rolls. The CCP has 220 million U.S. voter files. That's different than the census, right? And if so, how does that then help us understand the theft? And does it change your opinion that it wasn't the census rolls they were using to vote for people, but it was the CCP having 220 million voter files?
No, that's not what I was showing you back then. I showed that if you gave me the census, I could predict the outcomes.
Okay.
If you gave me the census, I could predict the voter rolls. And if you give me the voter rolls, I can predict the turnouts. In other words, they were all connected. It's not just one thing. And that's a simple thing to understand and to explain. Let's say you wanted to cheat an election. And so you stuffed a bunch of ballots. Well, you can't just stuff a bunch of ballots for 60-year-olds, let's pretend. Because if you did that, you'd have more 60-year-olds voting in a county than you have 60-year-olds. So the census is used as part of the algorithm to regulate how they were regulating the turnout using the rolls. So I'm not saying that the census wasn't important. It is important, but the rolls are the anchor point. Once you have the rolls, you use the census in a combined way to regulate the output.
I want to get another comment from you, but I got to give a closing comment to Garland Favorito, who has to go to another appointment. Go ahead, Garland. Closing comment from you, Garland.
No worries.
Brad, I just thank you for having me on. It's been amazing. I think this is just the beginning. I'm really excited. You know, you and I and Mike and everybody on the call has been waiting for this for 6 years, in Sydney as well. So, Dan, thank y'all.
Garland Favorito, voterga.org, voterga.org. Sydney, do you believe what Garland just said, that this is maybe going to bring this back? Because a lot of people have been afraid to talk about it for fear of being sued into oblivion. You know about that. Mike Lindell knows
resemble
about
that remark.
What's that?
I resemble that remark.
Yeah, exactly. You do resemble that remark. So a lot of people were afraid because of they're making examples out of you and Mike Lindell and others. I mean, some of us, even like myself, a broadcaster, praise the Lord, I was never sued, but I probably spent close to $50,000 having to sit for depositions and comply with subpoenas. So that cost me $50,000. I can't imagine, some of these other people, what they spent, but that has a chilling effect on broadcasters like me. It has a chilling effect on attorneys like you guys, Dan and Sydney. Do you think that what Garland just said, that this is now going to be a topic that people will come back to, or are they still going to be intimidated to talk about it?
I think it's very important that it is a topic that people come back to and that they stick to their facts as they're speaking about these issues, and that we must go to hand-counted, handwritten, hand-marked paper ballots if we are to have safe and secure elections. There is simply no computer on earth that cannot be hacked or programmed wrong to begin with to do whatever the programmer wants it to do. Clint Curtis and others have proved that beyond any doubt. We all know it. Mm-hmm. And that's got to stop, because the rule of law depends on the legitimacy of our institutions, and none of our institutions are legitimate right now. Mm-hmm. We don't know how many people in Congress, I think a lot, really didn't win their seats.
And that's on both sides of the aisle?
On both sides of the aisle. Absolutely.
I'm going to have you comment on that, Frank. But Sydney, I can let you go unless you want to stay, but I don't want to take any more of your time. But Sydney, I do want to ask, the Save America Act, I think it's passed the House. It's held up in the Senate. Thune, needs to do his job and let this thing go in and be voted on. But I do have to ask, we do need to be very careful that nothing gets added to any of the legislation. I don't know if the House version and the Senate version are different, but without getting in the weeds of how the process works, you guys all know, but for the audience, if the House version is different from the Senate version, then it has to go into conference and they work out their differences, and then it goes back to the House and back to the Senate. What I don't want to see is that, okay, fine, we've heard from the president, the American people are awake, they've gone on the website of the White House, they're seeing these documents, we needed secure elections. Well, what I don't want to see is the World Economic Forum's call several years ago for all of us to have a digital ID, to get online, have a bank account, and to vote. I don't want the solution to be, I have to surrender more of my liberties and freedoms. So we want paper hand counted. That doesn't mean we all agree to take a mark, Sydney.
Correct. Absolutely correct. No, we need to do a lot more to preserve our freedoms, and electing the right officials by a legitimate means is one way to do that. And we can't have a legitimate government without free and fair elections.
Sydney's website is defendingtherepublic.org, defendingtherepublic.org. She has lots of information there, and she has taken the hits, folks, and is still standing. Sydney, thank you for all you've done.
Thank you. You too. Everybody on this panel has an important role to play, and we have to keep on keeping on.
Indeed. Sydney Powell checking in tonight, defendingtherepublic.org. Frank, I want to stay with you a little bit longer. I need to let Dan go because Dan is suffering from walking pneumonia. But let me, before I let you go, Dan, go back to Frank. Frank, what do you think of what I just said about the fact that we don't want to go to digital ID? We don't need the solution to be what the World Economic Forum wants, is for us to get an ID. People, here's my concern. You guys are concerned about open borders. You're concerned about illegal immigrants. You're concerned about illegal immigrants getting a hold of government money. I did a whole hour on this in early 2020 during COVID, where the United Nations had just held a conference called, I think, ID 2020 is what the UN had held. And that was early 2020 when we were going through COVID. And I did a whole hour on the quest for all of us to get biochipped, to get an ID, biometrics, whatever. And they were saying that we can stop the illegal immigrants. We can deal with the issue of cross-border. People can come and go, but we'll know who's coming and going. We won't have to worry about people getting benefits they don't deserve or double dipping. You see now since 2020, it's come out all the fraud in, with the Somalis in Minneapolis, billions. I'm afraid that people are going to go, you know what? We got billions of dollars in fraud. all these illegals on the dole, people that shouldn't be here, illegals voting. We have lots of issues here. We have ID theft, identity theft. You know what? A digital ID might just solve a lot of problems for a lot of people. I'm afraid there's a lot of problems being offered here, which are legit problems. I'm afraid the solution is going to be the World Economic Forum saying you need your biochip, your biometric, or your digital ID. Will you warn conservatives that's not the solution?
Are you asking me or Dan?
You, Doug.
I've been on the internet most of my life. In fact, I'm number 297 on the internet. I was right at the beginning.
Are you joking? Or are you serious?
I am serious. I'm number 297 on the internet.
Wow. Al Gore was number one since he invented it, and you were number 297.
Yeah, right. Okay. He wasn't anywhere in the neighborhood at the time. So that's a joke for us who actually were the ones who were developing the internet. I was on the original grant. So, but the reason I say that is because I've been building electronics, designing electronics, building computers, designing electronic systems and in networks my entire adult life. Is my point. And I don't trust anything in my body that's electronic. I don't trust any electronic system that's centralized. In fact, what I do the worst thing we could possibly do would be to wire everyone, okay? Because who's writing the software is in control. In my election work as I travel the country, and Dan heard me talking about the other day, I advocate for exactly the opposite, taking back local control. The solution is not centralizing. The solution is diversifying. If you I was talking to a gentleman tonight. Here I am in Wisconsin. I gave a presentation in Waukesha. A gentleman from a neighboring town. They only have 1,200 people in their town. They don't need a tabulator to count their ballots. They don't need a state voter roll system to maintain their rolls. They can do it in a binder, and they can sit around a table and count their ballots in an hour or two and have full trust and full security because they know everybody in their own community. The solution is not someone in Washington, D.C. deciding who gets to vote or somebody in Washington, D.C. keeping your records. The solution is having someone local keeping the records and keeping track. Ironically, here I am in Wisconsin, and do you know where Wisconsin's voter rolls are in the world? They're in India. Okay. And if you're in Alabama, you know where their voter rolls are? Omaha, Nebraska, because they're ES&S. In other words, what's happened is by centralizing it, electrifying it, all we've done is taken it out of the hands of local people and given the control to someone else. And I don't want to put control of my elections and control of my life in the hands of a programmer in India. I want my local clerks, my local officials, the ones that I elect locally with clean and fair elections, to be making the representative decisions in my life that our Constitution intended.
Indeed. Great comment. By the way, Waukesha, Wisconsin, let's go ahead and throw this plug in, Dan. We have our National Worldview Weekend, the 22nd annual National Worldview Weekend at the Waukesha Expo Center. We were there a year ago this past April, standing room only. We are bringing the full Friday night, all day Saturday conference back. It's free. The first time in 22 years, free. But you do have to get a ticket. worldviewtube.com/events to get registered. Myself, Dr. Andy Woods, Patrick Wood on technocracy, transhumanism, Sharam Hadian, Alex Newman, Erwin Lutzer, Annie Cyrus, worldviewtube.com/events. Over 800 seats already gone. Friday night, October 23rd, Saturday, October 24th. Spread the word. Let's fill it up. We've never made one free before. Just renting the building for 2 days, folks, is $10,000. No joke. Not to mention the sound company, everybody we bring in, and the honorariums and airfare and travel for the speakers. But I mentioned that because I know have a lot of people watching tonight in Wisconsin and around the country that can easily get there. And you are in Waukesha tonight. Dan, as we get ready to wrap, What do you make of what he's saying in regards to now that we have this 220 million data dump that's been found that the CCP has 220 million U.S. voter files? I mean, at this point, if we don't do something, we're pretty much guaranteed that elections will be stolen. They have what they need to keep stealing elections, do they not, Dan?
Well, it's a frightening thing, and President Trump made it clear there's 220 million names on the voter roll that the Chinese now have. That record is your name and your address and all the elections you voted in, which ward you live in, who you vote for. It's a very interesting. The only thing they can't see is who you actually voted for. That data is not in there. But if the Chinese have this, and we've been working data for 6 years, and we're pretty comfortable in that space, the Chinese can quickly compare the donor records and figure out who the Republicans are and the Democrats are. And you can look at social media, and they do. And what the Chinese have effectively done is created the digital ID for each of us, only it's in China at the moment. We're not using it, but they know who each and every one of us are and whether we vote and what our approximate percentage of voter participation is and who we're going to vote for, because they can see for your donations or your social media. They are doing this because they got into the electronic voter rolls that were mandated by the Help America Vote Act, the Howse Act, which requires each state to have an electronic centralized voter roll. How interesting is that? They took it away from the local communities. By law, it must be centralized and it must be operated by one state official, Secretary of State, whoever the election administrator is. That's required by federal law. So the federal government handed China, here's 50 states, centralized database. And as Doug pointed out, and I probably heard it from me, the people who manage our WizVote database, 4 state contracts are let. Who's going to manage the database for the state of Wisconsin? 4 contracts. All the workers are in India. They're not vetted. We asked the WEC, who vetted these people? You know, well, the vendors vet the people, not the FBI, not the CIA. So if you know anything about the history of India as a 400+ year British colony, and that's where Russia and China and the UK and the Americans, that's like Spy Central in India. All the spies are in India, okay? And those are the people who have 24/7 access to do maintenance in the voter roll. And they're in there. So how in the world did Chinese get our voter roll? Well, we have 8.3 million names in our voter roll, but we only have 4 million Wisconsinites old enough to vote. You can see that the Chinese are, if they have our data, and there's no reason to think they haven't, because there's evidence to support the idea that the Chinese penetrate and other foreign countries penetrate our voter roll, well, then they're building the profile that you're worried about. You're talking about a digital ID. Well, it may come with a Chinese chop, a stamp, you know, because it won't be American made, you see. And this is their goal. They know more about Americans than any American knows about the Chinese. And this is a problem we have, and it's mandated by federal law under Howse. We don't have a choice. If we wanted to go back to, keeping our voter roll in the bottom desk drawer of the local clerk's office, can't do it. It's the law, the federal law. You got to have a statewide electronic database managed by one state official. That's the law. So it's an interesting problem, and I think there's a lot of work to be done to clean this up. And that's why using technology is important. We can use like fractal technology and Titan technology, other technologies, to analyze what the WEC sells us. We get a snapshot of our state voter roll. It's not the complete data. They won't tell you how old the voter is. They won't tell you the social security number and other things. But you get enough to figure out who the people are. And when you analyze the voter roll, you realize how random it is. The numeric sequence. Everyone's supposed to have a unique voter ID under Howse. You don't have that. You change your name, you get married, you change your name, move to a different town, you get a new ID number. So really, it's very difficult for the people to track what's going on in the data. And that's what creates the phantom population that the bad guys can tap. When you slip extra ballots through the tabulator, and that's how you win, you stuff the ballot box, you need to assign a name to each of those extra ballots. And we've got a population estimated somewhere around 460,000 extra names that don't match the addresses. They don't match anything. They may not even exist. This is the problem we have today. And our poor clerks, they rely upon the statewide electronic voter roll database. This is the only tool they have. So when you go to your clerk and say, hey, we suspect the problem, They don't want to hear it. This is what the state of Wisconsin gives us to use, and we're going to believe the state of Wisconsin is honest, and we're going to use it. But nobody, and I brought 9 lawsuits since 2020. When we started with Sydney, there have been 9 lawsuits in Wisconsin that I have filed with good litigators challenging the WEC on certain administrative procedures, because it's very important that our administration of elections is done properly, and it's an uphill battle because every time we file a lawsuit, we get resistance. Obviously, WEC brings in our state attorney general to defend it. Instead of saying, "Oh, thanks for the information, we'll go fix it," they sue you, or they defend the lawsuit. And to give you an example, the WEC approved an envelope for the return of these absentee ballots, and right on the envelope is a false statement. Well, we went to court. The judge saw it, issued a temporary restraining order. Lo and behold, the DNC and a bunch of other groups all intervened in the case. So here's my law co-counsel and I, 2 of us sitting there up against 13 lawyers from Perkins Coie and all these great big law firms fighting because they didn't want us to take the false statement off the envelope. And you know what? They substituted the judge, and the new judge said, whatever, it's okay, don't worry about it. This is what we're up against. For 6 years, we've been fighting to get the administration of elections so that the people can understand the process and trust in the process, and we fight our own government to do it, which is shameful. So this is where we are.
Indeed, it is. And I want to close here, but you're making a very interesting point about India. So we have here in the Mid-South, as we do in other parts of the country, but here in the Mid-South, we have a lot of upset folks here in West Tennessee because they're losing their jobs to folks in India. Some of them are coming here to work. They're getting in management, and we're told that they're hiring the people back in India. And you have Americans losing jobs. But what I just heard, it sounds like, I'm not accusing everybody. I'm not accusing every person that's in India. And I know some folks that are from India, and they're wonderful people. They have businesses and upstanding people. But what it sounds like the concern is some of them that may be tied back in with the CCP or the aspects of the deep state of India. Are you telling me that they're using Indian programmers to steal American data? And if they're doing that with voter rolls, why would they not be doing it with corporate technology and other things? And are you trying to tell me that one way the CCP is getting our data is through programmers like programmers out of India or other countries?
Well, I'm not saying that anybody, these are 4 state contracts that are let, and I'm sure they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing, but it bridges the question. That is, if this is national infrastructure, a security infrastructure element, which should be our voting systems, then it would make sense to have a vetting process for the people that are working on the back end of the system, because they have the open door. We can't.
But you made a comment that this is how the CCP got it, was maybe through India?
Who's to say? I'm not making any allegations, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that if you can't control access to the back end, and the people have to pay $12,500 to get in on the front end, and we're the citizens, the taxpayers, it just begs the question. And obviously the Chinese have the data. At 220 million sounds like just about every American voter. There's only 330 million Americans.
So Doug,
so they've got all the data.
Dan, are you expecting any prosecutions? What's that, Doug?
I have 220 million on my computer.
See, there you go.
I have the voter rolls for every state in the country.
Because you went and bought them, but you had to go and buy them, right?
Well, Mike bought the first one from Wisconsin for me, and he also bought the first one we got from Alabama, and that, so those were expensive. But around the country we've been teaming up and doing well. But what I want to come to is it's not just the voter rolls, and that's important. You need the voter rolls to cheat the elections, but you also need real-time access, and that's the cyber threat that he's talking about. Because let's say you want to cheat an election. Well, you need to know, what is the current tally? How many more ballots do I need to cheat? How many more ballots do I need to stuff? So the cybersecurity aspect of it during the election is key. And I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you do, remember Mike's first documentary in January 20, when he, Absolute Proof.
I was the producer. I post-edited that thing one night, 24 hours straight. So yes, I remember.
Exactly. And all those places, and guess where most of those little bands you showed attacks coming into our country were
China.
coming from? South Korea.
Oh, South Korea. Okay.
And I mean, half of them were from Huawei in China, and the other, but the bulk of them, go back and look at your own movie, buddy. And I'm kidding. And you're going to see that South Korea was, and there's a thing there called AWEB. And I visited that site while I was in South Korea last month. And why would there be so many communications happening during the election? You need the information ahead of time, and you can prepare ahead of time, and you can print millions of ballots ahead of time and fill them out ahead of time.
Well, that's what President Trump said tonight. He said that CCP was manufacturing ballots. Yeah.
Exactly. And by the way, I visited one of the plants in South Korea where they're printing them. And then
they're printing American ballots.
Yes. And then they're filling them out ahead of time and bringing them to America, and they're ready to go. So during the election,
just so the audience understands, this is not North Korea. This is South Korea, which, by the way, is about to be taken over by the communists. They just threw their last president in prison, did they not?
Exactly, President Yoon, and that's a big deal. But that's why I was over there observing their June 3rd election. They just have lost their country. They're changing their constitution right now from a free republic into a Soviet-style socialist country. They've lost their country. America's going to need to do something. We're going to have to figure that out. But before I get too far off topic, you need real-time access. So it's not just having the voter rolls ahead of time. You have to do the preparation ahead of time. And then you need real-time access where you follow who's voted and what the tallies are, and that's how you cheat.
Do you expect anyone to be charged? Because President Trump said tonight they've got names and they know who is doing this. Do you think anyone will be charged, Dan, or will it be the same old?
I think to have teeth, and this is a major announcement, and he gave 5 points with documents. Obviously, I'm sitting here. I haven't read them. I want to read them. If it can be proven that this was an internal conspiracy to effectively neutralize or overthrow the president of the United States, and if there aren't indictments and prosecutions, then this is very much like executive orders where some judge in podunk, sets it aside and it's over. It's very important that if the people who did this, if it can be proven, they need to be prosecuted and brought to justice, and we'll let the jury decide. But this is a really important thing. We've known this information since 2020. And if you go back into the record we discussed tonight, I talked about the letter from 2010. You raised the letter from 2010 about related to the CIA, the 2016 Jill Stein litigation where all the experts testified. We've known this for a very long time. But the establishment in Washington has done nothing about it. Congress, in my view, if you watch my program, I'm very clear that the Congress of the United States is dysfunctional given their spending habits, and the presidents come and go. And if you look at Joe Biden from the last administration, I'm respectful for the office of the president of the United States, but you had to wonder if Joe had any idea what was happening. It's the establishment that led him along. So if you're even President Trump in his first term, you walk in, swear you in, you're sitting in the Oval Office, boy, you made it to the top. And, to be respectful, you're probably the dumbest guy in the room for a couple of weeks until you get your feet on the ground and figure out how to be president. And that's the problem, that the establishment has as an agenda moving forward that is not interested in some pickup truck driver in Iowa who's paying $4 a gallon for gas. They don't care. They don't care anything about those people in the middle. This is, the peasants of the United States versus the elitists. And that's what we're up against as they control the process. And it's a fearful time to be an American. And the question is, how does it end?
Well, we're on borrowed time.
It doesn't end well.
With what the president said tonight, we're on borrowed time. Because if it isn't fixed, he just exposed all the problems. Now, I don't know where this data is. I just went to whitehousegov.com while you're talking and only had like 2 minutes to look, but I can't find it. Has anyone in the control room been able to find it? I'll tell you one thing they could start by doing is making sure it's on the front page right now so we don't have to go looking for it, because the older we get, the more less technical savvy we are. So there's a lot of folks out there that would like to see it, but they don't know how to find it. The younger crowd, I can go do it. I'm just saying we have people that are much older that they're not going to fool around with that. They need to be able to find it now.
It's important to read the documents carefully and understand what has been disclosed before you start making rash comments. I think it's very important to have the facts correct.
And we're going to go through those documents. We're going to go to White House Gov and we're going to try to find where they are. I wish they would put a button on the homepage, really easy to find, but we'll find it. If maybe they're not going to be posted until tomorrow. He said they were there now, but we're going to go through them. We're going to keep on this. We're going to come back to this because there's got to be some stuff in those documents that you guys haven't seen. I mean, obviously there's a lot of it you have, but are you guys expecting to find some surprises?
Well, we hope so. I mean, it would be...
Doug, you're not expecting a surprise?
To just regurgitate what we've known for 16 years. It would be nice to see something...
But aren't you expecting to find names of some of the people that have been involved in this and now kind of...
I already know.
Wow. All right. Well,
what you need to understand is this isn't just a few people that are fiddling around at the edges. This is institutional fraud. This is not merely election fraud. And I loved it that the president called that out, that in the briefings that he was supposed to be getting, the people that were supposed to be bringing him the fraud that was uncovered were not. So this is not merely how do we run our elections. This is also, we have infiltration in our government, deep infiltration. And so I actually think those prosecutions are more important than the other. If we had healthy government, we can fix any problem. Our problem is we don't have healthy government. And because we don't have healthy government, we have institutional election fraud sustained by the institution. So actually, I'd even put the election fraud stuff to the side for a minute and say, let's just round up all these criminals who've been suppressing the evidence that we know exists. I loved it when he mocked them, most secure election in history. Let's put those guys in prison. And let's do it next week. I know I'm being facetious, but the point is, and then we can address the election, because I don't care what actions we decide to take between now and November, and we urgently need to do that. Our real problem is that we've been infiltrated, and every level of government has been infiltrated. Trevor Loudon talks about it in his documentary, The Enemies Within.
Absolutely.
We are fighting ourselves, and we're in trouble. And so the reason we have a symptom of crappy elections is because we are now fully infiltrated. So I was really glad to hear him talk about that as well. And I'm more interested in that than the election data coming out, because I've already seen that.
I have an announcement to make before we go, guys, so hold with us. But Doug, what is your website?
Go to my social media page. You can see me on X, Dr. Frank Models, or you can go to my Facebook page, Douglas G. Frank, no period. And that's the best way to find out what I'm doing.
Okay. And what about you, Dan? Is he muted?
Uh-oh, we lost you.
I think he muted himself to cough.
Here we go. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I'm keeping my coughs off the air. I met X at Dan Eastman, and I mostly comment on economic issues because it parallels my show on your network, the Eastman Financial Report. But this is where election integrity matters, and I do comment from time to time on this issue because it affects the economy. If we don't have a free and fair democracy in elections, we don't have a fair economy. We have an oligarchy with a certain elite group making billions of dollars, and the Americans becoming a nation of peasants. And that's what I really harp on. You're looking at $40 trillion in debt, $2.5 trillion in annual deficit spending. And we look at the Federal Reserve and say, well, we need an independent Federal Reserve. They're captured by Congress. If they don't buy those bonds every year under quantitative easing, the bond market goes nuts, interest rates go to the moon, and the United States government collapses. We're in a bizarre situation, and it's not just elections. If you look what they've done to our economy, they've brought down the United States of America by spending us broke. And it wasn't the Chinese spending us. It was the people, the 435 members of the House of Representatives who control the purse strings of government, that pass budget after budget of deficit spending, and they borrow money. They have to borrow money, sell bonds to fund it. are at $40 trillion and counting. You get more than 25% of our tax revenue is going to pay interest on money they spent years ago. So it's not just the elections. What they're really doing is an insurgency in the United States to bankrupt us and strip us of our democracy. And in effect, someday it's coming to a head. And this is a scary time. So
indeed it is. Well, now you know why you need to listen to him every day, 11:30 Central, right here at worldviewtube.com, 11:30 Central. Dan Eastman, the Dan Eastman Report. Gentlemen, both of you, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Brannon. Good to see you, Doug.
You too. We'll be coming back to this as we go through these files. Now, before we go, folks, take a look at this. For the folks that maybe are new or joining us tonight, a huge audience tonight, we're being told. This is my Revelation commentary. This is volume 1 that's going to the printer this next week. Going to the print. That's volume 1 on Revelation. It's written for lay people. This is volume 2, and this is volume 3. It's my teaching through the book of Revelation, verse by verse, for a year and a half, and I put it in a book format. I want to stress, it is for lay people. This is written for the average person, high school and up. It's basically Tom Clancy meets Bible teaching on the book of Revelation, because I actually take the Bible, begin teaching it, and then I say, isn't that interesting? John the Revelator saying this about what he's seeing in his words and his vocabulary, and it sounds very much like what we see now happening on the world stage. So whether it is the 10 horns that are 10 kings, the Bible speaks about, that have not yet received the kingdom, meaning at the time John was writing, but will receive power as rulers, 10 world leaders, and then give their power to the Antichrist, well, doesn't that sound like what the United Nations is calling for? They've already called for dividing the world into 10 regions. Or how about the Club of Rome? Or how about the European Union Commission? So I go through this and I explain to you, here's what the Bible says is coming. And then I say, is there anything going on in the world that sounds like this? So it is basically, like I said, a Bible commentary for lay people meets Tom Clancy. You won't be able to put it down. It's full of news and information to help you understand the Bible. And I'm using Scripture to interpret Scripture. I'm using the book of Revelation. I'm using its foundation, the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. I'm going back to other Old Testament books to help you understand. I'm helping you understand why the rise of anti-Semitism in America. Why do we see in Revelation 12 this great war by Antichrist to wipe out every Jew on the planet? To understand why this is happening, you have to understand the Bible. Satan knows if we have a large number of Jews, particularly those that come to Yeshua, our Messiah, as their Savior, he's got a problem, because guess what the Bible talks about? 144,000 Jewish evangelists who have come to Christ. And then what happens at the very end of the book? Those who have become believers, the Jews during the tribulation, the Bible says they're going to cry out, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And then the second coming and the establishment of God's 1,000-year kingdom, the millennial reign. Now, if there's no Jew on the planet left, if none of them have come to Jesus, Yeshua, as Messiah, guess what? No Jew is here to cry out, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Satan knows if he can destroy every last Jew on the planet, he can stop God's kingdom from coming. He's not going to be successful. But I explain to you very complex issues in layman terms. Most Americans, and certainly, sadly, most Christians in America, most of them no longer know or understand why there is this rise in anti-Semitism. They don't understand that it is foretold in the Bible. A great Holocaust is coming. That's in the book of Revelation. Many pastors have now bought into replacement theology, believing God is done with the Jews and the nation of Israel, the people. I'm not talking about the government. Yes, they must have a homeland and be secure. Yes, the land and geography is important. Much of that book is taking place in Israel, in Jerusalem. But we're talking about the Jewish people. I can disagree with some things the government of Israel does, but I understand what God's plan is for the Jewish people. But many pastors today have bought into replacement theology that God has replaced Israel, the Jews, with the church. No, he has not. The Apostle Paul, a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin, in Romans 11 says, this has not happened. The promises of God to the Jewish people for that land are irrevocable. And many people say, well, they're an unbelieving people. They've broken their covenant with God. Well, you know what? Don't confuse the Mosaic covenant with the Abraham covenant. Mosaic covenant, you obey me, I'll bless you. You don't obey me, I'll punish you. The Abrahamic covenant of Genesis 15 has nothing to do with it being given to them whether or not they obey the Mosaic covenant. That's about blessing or punishment. God is going to keep his word one way or the other. And eventually they are going to fulfill those things, as we will see in that millennial kingdom, and they'll receive the promises. But many people don't understand what I'm saying. Many pastors today don't understand this. And so I wanted to write it to bypass the pastors of America, the quote, pastors of America. There are a few good pastors. There are some good shepherds, but there's very much a deficit. So we want to go around those churches that are teaching incorrectly. And I wanted to put out a commentary verse by verse on the book of Revelation in layman terms that even a high school student could understand, and bringing in so much news and history and information that you couldn't put it down. And I spent over 2 years now putting this together, and it'll be out this fall. We're taking pre-orders now. I hope you'll do that, because so much of what we're talking about tonight with bringing down America, elections, digital ID, digital currencies, the debt of America fits right in to the Bible and Bible prophecy. So please check it out. Get an order, worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. If you appreciate what I've said in the last few minutes, I am teaching through the book of Daniel on Sunday nights. I took a year and a half to teach through Revelation. I'm teaching through the book of Daniel on Sunday nights. Right now I'm in Daniel chapter 7. And that is the foundation for the book of Revelation. If you'd like to join us, it's 8 p.m. Central Time on Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Central, Sunday nights, 9 Eastern Standard at worldviewtube.com. If you can't join us live, then we post it every Monday morning after I've taught it Sunday night. So again, I hope you'll join us. We have put a lot of those teachings, by the way, on one website. I think, guys, is it lastdaysstudy.com? lastdaysstudy.com. We have put our collection of my 53 lessons, 1 hour, 53 lessons on Revelation. We have most of my Daniel lessons up there. We probably need to catch up, put a few more. I think I've done 17 now on Daniel. We're putting them all at lastdaysstudy.com. So you can find them all in one place. And I wanted them there all in one place so that if and when the church is removed and people are asking what just happened, well, there'll be one website where it's all contained, lastdaysstudy.com. But join us on Sunday nights, won't you? 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern Standard. Before we go tonight, we haven't stopped for one commercial. If you appreciate what we're doing tonight, would you please consider going to worldviewtube.com/sponsors, worldviewtube.com/sponsors. I could have stopped many times for commercial breaks tonight. I didn't. We have a lot of great sponsors. Many of these things will support your health. Worldview Healthcare, you can become your own urgent health care with the Wellness Company kits. We keep several of the blue emergency kits around with the ivermectin and the different antibiotics. We, of course, Worldview Gold. I've been working with this gold company here for 18 years. If you want to find out about taking custody of precious metals or putting gold into your IRA, I've worked with this company for 18 years. Melissa Protein. Melissa, my wife, got me into this. I take 5 or 6, 7 of these tablets every day to help me burn fat. It is 100% plant-based, and it helps me maintain my muscle mass, particularly as we get older. We don't want to decrease in that. Bella Grace, I take it each and every day. I have since December of 2023. Not only have I had incredible hair growth through the collagen in there and the cat's claw, which is the anti-inflammatory, and the astaxanthin that takes on the free radicals. The leaky gut that I had that was creating the skin condition, my hands cracking and bleeding, eczema, all that disappeared when I got on Bella Grace in December of 2023. I had over 100 clinical trials. It's not a joke. We have many hundreds. I think we're somewhere around 1,000 people that subscribe to get this each and every month. If it wasn't working for them, they wouldn't subscribe. They'd cancel. We have so many people that tell us their testimony like I just told you mine. I couldn't get rid of the eczema on my hands, cracking and bleeding year round. My hair was thinning horrifically. I got on Bella Grace, got rid of the leaky gut. Your collagen's made of, your gut lining is made of collagen. I got rid of the leaky gut. A lot of this cleared up. My acid reflux went away. We have Worldview Talk. You'll find bulletproof backpacks there. These are great for schools. Send the kids, grandkids, elementary, high school, university, back to school with bulletproof backpacks. Swish for Life, that's loaded with glutathione. 165,000 studies on glutathione to detox your cells. Some studies show it may remove mercury from your brain, helping prevent Alzheimer's and dementia. You know I take the Gatatana every day. That's the green phytoplankton plant. The man that came up with this was diagnosed with a terminal disease. He was told he had weeks to live. He started drinking and eating this phytoplankton, lived another 10 years. His biopsies came back benign. So check that out, won't you? So again, if you appreciate all we've done tonight without taking one commercial break, thank you for your support. Don't forget about our foundation. That's at worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. That is our church, and that helps us to push out free programming for ministry and education, as well as support our Sunday night church service, as I was telling you about a while ago. Worldviewfoundation.com. Roll the music. Let's call it a night. What a great lineup tonight. Aren't you glad to have those individuals on board? There you go. I hope you'll tell your family and friends. We're here each and every Monday through Friday evening, 7:30 to 9. Of course, my Worldview Report newscast starts at 7 p.m. Central Time, and then Brannon Howse Live at 7:30 Central. Getting a lot of great texts and emails, people thanking us for tonight's program. Huge audience tonight, folks. We broke some big records tonight, so thank you for that. We're going to stay on it. We're going to find out where those documents are at the White House Gov website. White House, what is it? Whitehouse.gov. We're going to go there, find these documents, go through them. We will be doing more programs on this. Tomorrow, we'll get back to talking about Iran. We have some more developing and breaking news related to that as well. That will have to wait till tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Till next time, may God save America. Take care. Friends, this is Brannon Howse. For more than a year now, I've been teaching through the book of Revelation, and the response from you has been overwhelming. You've asked me again and again, when are you going to put this study in print? We want to mark it up. We want to share it with our families. Well, it's here. My brand new 2-volume commentary on the book of Revelation, verse by verse, chapter by chapter. This is not a watered down, allegorized replacement theology approach to Revelation. This is a literal, grammatical, historical study, the way the Lord intended his word to be read. And I connect the prophecy of Revelation to the headlines you're watching unfold right now.